AfriPlay Hub presents a power-packed panel session sponsored by Policy Vault Africa, featuring distinguished voices from across Africa's gaming and regulatory ecosystem. The discussion focuses on regulation, technology, artificial intelligence, and the balance between oversight and innovation in the gaming industry.
Good afternoon. I am Alain Sanda from Cameroon.
Good afternoon. I'm Peter Xitile, CEO of African iGaming Alliance.
Good afternoon. My name is Ajibola Padre, and I'm the commercial director de Minacharia, a company.
Madame, bonjour à tous. Je me nomme Monsieur Bobo Esseditier. Je suis responsable du système d'information de la cellule de surveillance des jeux en RTC, République démocratique du Congo.
Thank you very much, my distinguished panelists. You can see how power-packed my panelists are. That's a deep wealth of knowledge from everyone. I'll start my conversation from the middle. I'll start with Peter. Peter represents iGaming Alliance Africa, and it's an organization that has a membership that cuts across over 20 jurisdictional zones. For Peter, as the unified voice of the organization that you are, what are the most common occasional friction points that you hear from members when integrating with national lottery systems?
Thank you very much, Ken. Let me just start off by saying that good regulation is not a problem. Problem becomes when the design of the systems are not done properly. The biggest challenge, like I said, is not oversight itself. License operators fully accept the need for regulatory visibility and textual transparency. The challenge is fragmentation. Across Africa, you often see different countries requiring different team cabinet integration. This morning, the lead consultant of risk consulting fortune talk about standards. So this is what I'm talking about. Then there are also different reporting formats, different data fields, different monitoring vendors across Africa. Like we say, I present an association with members operating in 20 different countries require that they use the same systems across Africa. The main friction points, like I said, it's around the multiple API requirements for every regulator requirements, different definitions, key metrics around how do you go about with the GGR, real-time monitoring requirements, frequent changes in typical requirements. So it all boils down to a standardization across regulatory markets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Maybe just a sub-question to that one and ask two. In situations where, regardless of how the government or what the government is insisting or regulator is insisting, in such situations where they might beat your members to comply with certain monitoring systems, no matter how fragmented, how have members been dealing with such requests?
Thank you very much. I think it also boils back to conversations that were held this morning. This morning started with the Pumbara regulator as CEO. It's not all about harmonization. What basically I say with that, let's ensure that the regulators, there's an element of cooperation. You cannot harmonize the rest of the country, but it's important that there is cooperation amongst the regulators. We've been saying the whole morning this afternoon, talking about the policymakers. The policymakers will require this, but the regulators should be sure that they train or they bring the policymakers up to speed. It was said this morning that more of the times we only engage the policymakers when we are done with our gaming policies or whatever. So we should ensure that we engage them even when we start, also that with the whole ecosystem, including the operators.
Fantastic response, Peter. I'm glad to tap into your wealth of experience. We have a bit of a diverse panel here. My apologies for skipping you, Ajibola. It's the only lady in what you should have done first. But I'll go straight to you, Ajibola. With artificial intelligence is often feared as an intrusive surveillance tool. And if you remember the last conversation, last panel, this was discussed about as something that should be embraced versus feared, right? How does evidential AI utilizing machine learning to transition the military monitoring from active to short-term intervention, which is seamless? What is that?
Okay, thank you, Ike, for that question. I do agree with you that AI is often seen as this big surveillance, intrusive, vindictive tool, right? Well, that's a big misconception because at the heart of it, ideally, what it should do is enable regulators to make smarter decisions in a faster, lighter way that's less disruptive to the market. At Evidential AI, what we do is we use machine learning as well. And our machine learning is designed in such a way that it helps regulators move from reactive enforcement to more proactive, fast, continuous, risk-based, approach. In such a way like it looks like an operating system running right in the background. And this helps operators move from doing the heavy lifting of manual audits, physical inspections, even, what's it called now? Even periodic, reporting cycles, right? At the end of the day, AI is a decision supporting tool in the hands of regulators. If you look at the industries across board, especially in financial services industries, AI, artificial intelligence is only, right? Transactions, multiple millions of transactions are happening every day, right? And these are too much for individuals to sit, assess at scale. And this is where the advantage use of artificial intelligence comes in, which is what Evidential AI is putting to the table. And what we built is not digital to the operators. We built something that is simple, it's light to use, it's modular, it's scalable. It meets operators where they are, it meets regulators where they are. No player in the industry, be it operators, be it regulators, had to overhaul their entire systems to be able to plug into this. So this is the advantage, that artificial intelligence can bring to the table, which will be built at intentionally.
Thank you. I think, but just listening to you speak, I think the question on that is people fear what they don't understand, absolutely right, and then they don't embrace it. How do you manage to ensure that these regulators understand that this is the value it will bring to them, and then they're able to embrace it in such a way that you can see results?
Okay, making for a follow-up question. I do agree that regulator trust is critical. And how do we build regulator trust? Regulators are not going to move from the traditional audit systems simply because there is a technology tool, in existence. That trust comes from understanding what the model does, validating what it does, and seeing it at scale. And in order to be able to do this, it's important that regulators have visibility. And I think it was Mother Esther that mentioned, understanding what exactly these technologies are doing for them, right? So they have visibility into how these models work, how to manage the data that they have, where there are errors, how are these errors managed, for instance, right? And then, adding on to that, I would also say that running pilots are also very, very important, in order to show regulators measurable outcomes of using, solutions like this as well. So when I say measurable outcomes, what am I talking about? Showing them the improved tax assurance, showing them improved compliance rates. With the pilots, you can do this in a very controlled way, right? So it's not all of the markets. It's, limited, operators, limited players in the space. And you're going to be working with actual markets data. So you have information from your markets to make decisions, in terms of reforms.
Thank you very much, Asba. I will build on that question to come over to Prakash. So it's also a follow-up, similar to the question I asked Ajbola. Drawing on your 25 years of business-to-business governance experience that you have, how do you communicate governments, decision makers, and private creators that implementing all of these technologies, be it monitoring or tracking technologies, is a mutually beneficial, cost-effective solution rather than how they see it in most cases as commercial trade?
Yeah, that's a very great question. Thank you very much for that. Well, it's a challenge. I won't deny it's a challenge because
When you come, the whole issue is about transparency. And transparency is actually met with extraction of data. You get data, you're able to then understand and analyze what the operators are actually generating and what they are supposed to declare. And when we go into a country, we discuss with, of course, the stakeholders as government, could be the regulator, could be the revenue authority, and of course, we meet with the operators. But we are under a mandate, so it's up to the government or the regulator to measure what are the challenges today. And obviously, the challenges are pretty common across the region. And what we do, we help to reconcile the frictions between operators and the regulators by bringing to the table not a reconcile tool, but more a tool that's going to help them understand where are the gaps and how to bridge these gaps. You have to remember, in this sector, in the gaming sector, you have the false sector, and you have larger falls. And that's one of the challenges for most of the other relay is how to capture more of the formal sector, because that's also creating a challenge with the formal sector. The formal sector is fixing a lot of competition from the peer followers. And of course, they are paying taxes, they're paying their fees, they're paying licenses. So there is a being balance. And with extraction of data, because of course we are a fully data-centric company, only but when we cross-analyze data, we get full visibility on what's going on in form at the follows. So there is, of course, a lot of pushback from the operators because they don't understand why the regulator will trust them with what they bring to the table as a self-attribution, and it's completely understandable. But today, you need to work with automation. Automation is important. We have spoken a lot about AI in our panel, and I appreciate a lot of what was said during the conversations. But AI is not enough. You also need to have a good collaborative, synchronized attitude with the operators and the regulators so that there is a clear understanding of what the regulator gets to extract this data, and we work under a mandate of the regulator of other front. And what the operator is actually seeing in this paper. And sometimes we have to actually to balance the gaps and the leaks in the revenue of the operators and their per share. So there is, a coercion that you need to bring to the table, and you have to be fair, of course, to the operator, because they are very important in the contribution that they make. But the regulator needs to have full transparency on what are the amounts they're supposed to collect on the manual process. It comes back to fiscal policy, it comes back to a lot of the internal the system which are based and how the regulator wants to apply that. Definitely.
You're actually striking a very delicate balance between how you ensure that some creators see and of course how the rules is embraced. I think the conversation needs to move a little beyond just the issue of trust to ensuring that you have the right canvas and the right regulatory systems in place across board, right? That as you say, some of this that programs is not even about the regulator not trusting the kind of statements that they receive from these operators, but just also being able to see what is possible within that ecosystem for the regulators. I think I like to have a sense of how they should regulate versus your regulatory partner. I think we play a very important role as in life as something in that equation. But I'll call it to you. I just need to go across the room, Brooke. And my next question will go to Isanda. I understand you like to speak in Christ. That word. Fantastic. So please, if you'd like to follow this conversation, I'd like to ask for him to bring headsets. The question I have for you is, you're an administrator, right? As a state administrator, how can you ensure that the push for deep digital monitoring does not unintentionally violate consumer privacy or create systemic vulnerabilities in national data infrastructure?
Bien, je crois que l'une
les fonctions premières d'un État, c'est d'assurer la sécurité des personnes et des biens. Et face à la montée ou au développement de l'économie numérique, notamment, il peut arriver que cette liberté des personnes et des biens soit ou semble être menacée. D'où on peut se poser la question de savoir comment concilier cette liberté ou alors la nécessité d'assurer la sécurité des personnes et des biens avec cette liberté engendrée par la modernité de l'économie. Pour cela, les bonnes pratiques demandent de privilégier une approche basée sur les risques plutôt que des contrôles globaux ou systématiques. C'est pourquoi, dans le cas du Cameroun, par exemple, nous pensons qu'il n'est pas question d'assister le secteur économique, surtout l'économie numérique, mais de cibler les activités dites sécurito-sensibles qui feront l'objet d'un contrôle plus strict. Maintenant, les activités commerciales policières peuvent faire l'objet d'un contrôle moins strict, ce qui permettrait à l'économie numérique de se développer et au secteur de l'activité comme celui qui nous concerne, celui des jeux, d'engendrer la croissance est nécessaire pour le développement de notre pays.
Geographically, I know very well, and I know that we have a very, very decentralized system of sorts across the Ministry of Finance. So now, across the room, all of them take different roles in the regulatory ecosystem. The question I would ask you is, how are you leveraging digital monitoring systems as a country? Leveraging them amidst all the fiscal reforms that you're making to capture and formalize revenue from a largely informal gaming sector that's point where.
Je tente l'impôt après la fin de la traduction. Je veux m'exprimer en français. Donc, effectivement, au niveau de la RTC, le Police démocratique du Congo, nous avons une cellule de surveillance des jeux d'argent et des hasards. Nous n'avons pas encore un établissement assez indépendant, mais cela est déjà prévu. Il y a un projet de loi qui est soumis à les ventes dans le pays. Et ce projet de loi institue l'autorité des régulations des jeux d'argent. Alors, actuellement, au niveau institutionnel, donc, la cellule est une entité qui dépend directement du ministre des Finances. Alors, s'il faut revenir sur comment nous gérons les jeux informels et comment nous assurons également que les contrôles restent discrets et que cela ne perturbe pas les marchés des acteurs existants dans les secteurs des jeux. Je veux déjà dire que nous sommes en train de mettre en œuvre, à travers un partenaire technique qui est le présent à ces assises, un système de monitoring automatisé. Cela donc permettra d'automatiser les contrôles des opérateurs des jeux et toutes les opérations qu'ils réalisent. Alors, ces systèmes-là contiennent également un module qui permet d'aller sur le net et de repérer tous les opérateurs illégaux, c'est-à-dire ceux qui n'ont pas des autorisations et des agréments étudiants obtenus auprès de la cellule de surveillance des jeux d'argent. Alors, une fois ces modules permettent d'identifier, en collaborant avec une autorité de notre pays, autorité de régulation de la poste et télécommunications, qui se charge donc de bloquer tous ces opérateurs illégaux qui sont dans les secteurs informels. Alors, comment nous arrangeons pour que la régulation reste discrète, comme les veut l'État? Nous assurons, par exemple, à l'État pour nous sommes de veiller à ce que la régulation, sa mise en œuvre, n'entraîne pas une hausse considérable des coûts. Parce que, comme vous le savez, Au niveau du marché, il y a les acteurs qui ont déjà des commissions. Il y a les agrégateurs, il y a également les opérateurs de jeux qui collaborent généralement avec les sociétés des mobile money. Il y a déjà des commissions qui sont déjà perçues. Et donc, un modèle économique. Alors, nous nous efforçons que lorsque nous installons cette régulation, que cela s'intègre dans ces modèles économiques sans toutefois chambouler ce qui est déjà fait. Alors, nous veillons à ce que la commission qui sera perçue dans le cadre de cette régulation, c'est-à-dire dans le cadre de ces monitoring, ne soit pas excessif. De sorte que les marchés des innovateurs et des sociétés de mobile money ne soient pas suffisamment perturbés en termes économiques. Peut-être on y reviendra également pour les autres aspects techniques et qu'il faudrait également intégrer dans notre système de monitoring automatisé pour ne pas perturber les marchés.
Thank you very much, Shavini. I think it's a step in the right direction that DRC is going. And it's also a step that most countries have also been not seeing as well. To put in place this type of automatic monitoring, as you say, just to ensure that you're capturing the informal sector, we're able to at least understand the landscape from maybe revenue, what point of view, etc. But I think it's a step in the right direction. It will be interesting to see how far the DRC is able to implement this as they continue on their journey. I would come back to Peter. So back to industry 360. How can regulators, and this is your opinion based on maybe seats, how can regulators and industry stakeholders collaborate to design what we call invisible compliance architecture that guarantees state revenue visibility without degrading the player experience or slowing down platform performance?
Thank you very much, IK. The ideal compliance system should be invincible to the player and also almost invisible to the operator. And the other thing is that it requires regulators, operators, and technology providers to engage at the desired stage rather than after the system has already been procured. Like what I've been listening to my brother from DFC, since they followed a model similar to that one. So there are three principles that we need to look into. First is the API architecture, modern contrary solutions to collect only data that regulators genuinely require, and doing so through lightweight ADS rather than the basic data extraction. The second one is the risk-based monitor. Not every transaction requires the same level of scrutiny. Intelligent monitoring allows the monitors to focus on anomalies, suspicious transactions, and tax risk rather than create unnecessary reporting barriers. Simply IK is about collaborative testing. I just spoke about that one before. Deployment operators should be involved in the sandbox testing to ensure water tools do not introduce latency, disrupt, or lightweight. Talk about the players or negatively impact customer experience. When oversight is properly designed, governance gain better scrutiny. Everything is visible. Operators pays lower cost, and players enjoy a seamless experience. That is what we mean by visible oversight. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for that response. I think we'll just go around to do normal tech and then I'll almost said tech. I would go back to Ajibala. My question is, in your experience, working with governments across Africa, what are the primary technical and operational challenges for deploying AI-driven compliance tools across fragmented African markets, ever so fragmented? And how can we ensure that these are already integrated without imposing heavy technical features on the bridges?
Thank you for the question. Again, I do agree with you that Africa definitely presents a uniquely complex regulatory environment, And, when Nita was asked from the first question, you also highlighted that, right? It's highly fragmented. You've got different countries, different jurisdictions, sometimes all within the same country, different states, different policies with different requirements, right? Different licensing models, different voting formats, different compliance processes. So I think that's, bringing this back to how do we with AI here, is that it's important that whatever AI audience you're building for this market, for this environment, it has to be flexible. It has to take this into consideration, right? I would also add that, from an operational standpoint, right? He also mandated operation, right? Regional operation, function-wide operation. I think that's also a gap that I've seen in my experience. So there's just so many different processes across board that for operators, they also have to play across these different jurisdictions, and it becomes a complex environment for them. If we're bringing it back to, AI support here, it means that whatever we're building as well has to take that into consideration, and it should be flexible enough to accommodate different markets, because you find that there are different regulatory maturity levels, different infrastructure readiness, different data, infrastructure levels as well. So you have to, take that into consideration whenever you're building. I'd also add that another challenge that we find, at least from my own experience, is in terms of data. Machine learning, AI, is only as good as the data that you're feeding it, right? And so when you have incomplete data, when you have manual data or semi-manual, bringing it back to what he also said about API integration, when you have limited API integration as well, what you're going to be working with becomes limited, right? And so again, it goes back to what I answered in my first question about all it built at Ebenezer AI, which is it's slice, it's modular, it's stackable, because you need to be able to take into consideration, meet the operators, meet the regulators where they are, and then taking them, to the next level. So you're stacking it up as you go, because again, the market dynamics. And if you look at Africa as a whole, innovation here has to take all of these different constraints into consideration, and that is how we build for success, right? Because you're building in spite of the constraints, but you're making it work in such a way that you're taking market dynamics into consideration. It's practical, it's lightweight, it's easy, and appropriate of the market.
What keeps jumping out at me is the issue of data building. So data sovereignty, the data protection in this sense. And that's a question I think I've asked the woman a couple around me to ask after this round of questions. But before I go there, I would come back to Prakash. And of course, this will debate about data. From a technical perspective, what safeguards should gaming regulatory tech industry implement to ensure that massive data extraction does not create network latency that disrupts live betting or real-time daily transaction? And before they respond to that, I just want our analysts to quick take a bit about what this means for us as African countries, how we are thinking about data protection in general. Particularly, when do you think of the fact that most of these monitoring tools processing large amounts of data across board? So how are you thinking about it? And particularly the roles you play in different capacities. So over to you, Prakash.
Thank you. So that's a good question, because the fact of data security is a real issue. Today we have hackers, we have a cyber issue that is across to all. All countries are subject to that, and all activities are subject to that. It's not only in the gaming or the gambling compliance, it's across the board. You have the problem of cyber. So, cybersecurity is a good problem. So we go at holistic solution specs. We come with, of course, the data extraction process. We analyze data and we translate data. But we also securize data, because we need to make sure this data that belongs to the people is really very sensitive. And that's why we do not touch any of the data unless it is free of your eyes by our contract, the mandate that we have with the government or the regulator. And this data is that, like we analyze about 40 terabytes of data per day. For the people who are in the room and understand that 40 terabytes is a huge amount of data. And this data goes across different formats, depending on what is being used as a platform by the operators. All right. So we extract this data. You have to then
legitimize the data, and we need to. So we work in a footed ETL.c configuration, whereby we analyze this data, translate it, load, and certify this bit. So the data is accurate and is legible for the regulator of tax authority to understand what is going on. If there's no automation, that data is not pumped. You don't have real figures. That's the part. And this data needs to be secured. So we have to secure and make sure that everything is protected within the confines of compliance that is in the hands of the regulator of the government. That's why.
Fantastic. Thank you for the response, Prakash. Yes, please. Over to you, Didi.
Je voudrais renchérir par rapport à l'intervention des co-débatteurs. Effectivement, en termes de sécurité, il y a également l'aspect de disponibilité. Et ce qui compte par la sécurité de l'information, il y a la confidentialité, l'intégrité et la disponibilité. Alors, en termes de disponibilité, ce qui peut être également prévu, c'est faire en sorte qu'on ait un système de sauvegarde et que les bases de données qui sont interrogées régulièrement pour le travail de l'autorité de régulation peut demander extraction des données massives, que ces interrogations de données se fassent au niveau du serveur ou du système qui gère les backups, plutôt que d'utiliser les systèmes qui sont en production, ce qui peut entraîner des latences dans les autres fonctionnalités.
Thank you. Any other thoughts you want to share across the room?
Briefly as well to what both of them has said is that when it comes to data protection, it's also important that responsible governance is followed. So it ensures that promoting our content is being used, fairness, high data being collected, as well as even who is handling the data, right? So there's a need for data minimalization. There's a need for rule-based access, right? So we throw around data a lot, but it's also important to specify that it's not just this massive data that everybody, on the regulator side or even on the platform provider side has access to. It should be rule-based, just so that we can also, enforce proper data protection guidelines. But I would also add that, in terms of even the data that we're collecting, it's good to also clarify that, this data should be relevant to what you're trying to achieve, right? So in terms of the requirement, right, it's not personal data you're collecting, but that's also very important in terms of data protection, right? It is data that is going to be used in terms of risk assessment, pattern recognition for the purpose of regulation, not just block data.
Super. Thank you. Peter, your thoughts?
That's exactly because the data sovereignty is a legitimate concern for all governments. So the solution is not necessarily keeping all data within a single country. The solution is to ensure that government maintains ownership, control, and lawful access to regulatory data regardless of where the technology is hosted. Strong governance, when my colleague just said, is more important than where the server is located. Thank you.
Is that a concern? The fact that the data is not where else most of the time with big jurisdiction that the processors operating, is that a concern for operators?
Yes, it is a concern. I think you've seen of data protection laws in the European region. Every country data only fund that government tourism data sharing agreements, like with one of the data sharing agreement is South Africa, for example, the Easter, the capital, but if we share the data, every data is supposed to be hosted within the country. Very good.
Thank you very much. I will go to I'll go to DE again. And then my last question may be for the so DE, the question I want to ask is integrating government tax platforms with private sector software. Most of the time we see that integration process always creates some kind of digital fiscal reforms. What are the primary technical hurdles the DRC has faced or continues to face when deploying these oversight systems? And how are you working to overcome them?
Effectivement, lorsqu'il y a intégration dans les cas des réformes, d'un système unique acquis par les gouvernements, et les entreprises sont amenées à intégrer ces systèmes. Il y a plusieurs défis. On a d'abord les défis en termes d'électricité. Plusieurs entreprises ne sont pas digitalisées. Ils utilisent des méthodes manuelles pour gérer leurs transactions. Et lorsqu'il y a une intégration, par exemple, lorsqu'il est conduisant la réforme de la facture normalisée, nous avons eu ces problèmes au niveau des entreprises, mais aussi au niveau des solutions informatiques utilisées par les entreprises. Parce que plusieurs sont donc les utilisateurs des logiciels qui sont conçus par d'autres personnes. Alors, pour faire des intégrations nécessaires pour communiquer avec un système adopté par les gouvernements, il faut parfois des travaux de développement qui peuvent être faits par des éditeurs qui se trouvent hors du pays. Et ça, évidemment, ça représente un grand défi auquel on fait face. Alors, s'il faut revenir sur les contextes du secteur des jeux des hasards, nous sommes en pleine mise en place des systèmes automatisés de monitoring des opérations de jeu, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure. Alors, nous avons déjà beaucoup de défis. Le premier défi, c'est économique, comme je le disais. L'intégration de la commission nécessaire, le monitoring, va un peu projeter les modèles économiques des opérateurs des jeux, des applicateurs, des sociétés minimales. Donc, il y a en quelque sorte des gens qui n'ont pas. Et s'ils n'acceptent pas des pertes, ils peuvent répercuter cela dans les coûts supportés par les joueurs. Et ça, nous avons quitté ces concepts des contrôles discrets, comme on le dit, mais ça va engendrer certains désagréments au niveau des utilisateurs. Alors, sur le point de vue technique, il y a également un autre désagrément parce qu'on risque d'avoir ce qui est des modèles qui est les plus utilisés par nos partenaires techniques, c'est centralisé, c'est-à-dire utiliser la plateforme pour l'intégrer avec la société de paiement. Alors, on risque d'avoir une sorte un point clic et défaillance. Parce qu'actuellement, nous avons plusieurs opérateurs qui se sont intégrés aux plateformes des mobile money et les agrégateurs. Donc, ça signifie qu'ici, il y a un problème au niveau du plateforme, de l'agrégateur ou de l'opérateur. C'est seulement cette plateforme-là qui est concernée. Mais lorsque nous utilisons une plateforme centralisée, utilisée par l'autorité de régulation nationale, le problème, c'est que nous avons donc un point de défaillance unique. Et si cette plateforme a un problème, on prend beaucoup de temps pour traiter certaines transactions. C'est donc tout l'écosystème, tous les secteurs des jeux qui s'est réduit. Ça c'est déjà le problème technique et de pouvoir voir, mais aussi, il faudrait des synthèses de veille technologique accentuées. Parce que les entreprises peuvent vouloir évoluer, changer d'approche des développements, changer et frapper régulièrement, changer des API utilisés. Voilà, donc, dans cette intégration. Alors, l'autorité de régulation des jeux doit anticiper, mettre en place un cadre d'échange permanent permettant d'anticiper les évolutions en termes technologiques des opérateurs du jeu ou qui n'est pas cassé. Parce qu'il peut y avoir un besoin pressant pour l'opérateur du jeu d'innover et faire évoluer sa plateforme, mais qui serait donc retardé par le fait que l'autorité de régulation des jeux n'est pas prêt avec des API, tout ça, pour prendre en charge de la version supérieure de la plateforme des opérateurs. Donc, c'est aussi des questions que nous devons bien adresser.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would ask Sandra one last question, and then we'll take a minute to go around the room and close the panel. I'll wrap up. For you, how can state administrators, Sandra's question was for you, ensure that the push for deep digital monitoring does not unintentionally violate consumer privacy or create systemic vulnerabilities in national data infrastructure?
Ce qu'il faudrait déjà relever, c'est que en matière de protection des données, la règle devrait être le respect de la proportionnalité et de l'intérêt public. Dans cette matière, toutes les mesures qui doivent être prises doivent s'assurer que cela rentre dans le cadre de l'intérêt public, l'intérêt général, je peux dire. Et l'intervention d'un organe indépendant, ici notamment du juge, est important. Parce que le juge, c'est lui qui doit apporter la garantie que toutes les mesures prises visent à protéger les données personnelles. Donc, à notre niveau, par exemple, au Cameroun, nous avons mis en place une législation, notamment en matière de protection des données personnelles, qui permet de veiller à ce que tout cela soit pris en compte. Donc, voilà ce que je pourrais dire à ce sujet.
So I'm rounding up this panel session, but I will go around the room one last time. You're allowed to speak to my question in 1 minute each. If we were to return to the GTSA, say in 5 years' time, what specific technological milestone would indicate that Africa as a whole has successfully mastered frictionless, invisible regulatory oversight? I'd like you to share your thoughts in 1 minute each. Starting for Prakash.
Thank you. So it's about a standardization and compliance. If we can add a regional standardization and APIs that was mentioned earlier in UPC, and by the regulation to a certain extent, it has to be compliance that is met by all the regional productions, if not across the continent. That would make information more fluid, more transparent, and across the board, all the organisers who are in this country would be also operating in the neighboring countries. The information would be translated in a very holistic way, systematically, and it would eliminate the issue of friction and of data being leaked out or translated in an erroneous way. The other thing that is very important also.
1 minute.
Sorry.
Thank you. Sandra, please.
Et pour ma part, le monde entier et l'Afrique en particulier font face aujourd'hui à des menaces, notamment relativement à la lutte contre le blanchiment de capitaux et le financement du terrorisme. Et il a été constaté que à travers les jeux d'argent et d'argent, notamment les jeux en ligne, ces crimes-là passent facilement par ces canaux-là. Donc, la centralisation est importante pour parer la route à ces fléaux. Et la coopération à la fois régionale et sous-régionale semble être un instrument important pour que nous puissions, à travers les jeux, développer nos économies, mais également protéger la sécurité de nos pays.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ita.
Thank you, okay. Africa has an opportunity to be from legacy regulatory models. We can build regulatory systems that are digital from the start, data-driven by design and collaborative by nature. If you get the slide, you can improve compliance, increase government revenue, protect consumers, and attract investments without creating unnecessary friction for licensed operators. The goal should be simple: maximum transparency, the minimum disruption, and sustainable growth for the entire ecosystem.
Thank you very much. Jibal.
Thank you. I will look at it 5 years back here. We will not be discussing, AI in regulatory governance at this stage. I would hope that data in the room are operating in a hybrid system, right? And what I mean by that is AI is doing the heavy lifting in terms of reporting, validating reports, pattern recognition, data model processing, whereas our regulators here are doing the work of accountability, governance, decision-making in terms of the results of, what the AI had delivered to them. And because I believe that is the future. It's smarter regulation, and that would show sustainable and amicable.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Steve, what was you?
Ok. Alors, si on doit faire un retour dans les temps, si on doit revenir à la première édition des GTCA en 2024, moi je dirais en rapport avec la sécurité de l'information et la souveraineté des données liées au secteur des jeux, moi j'encouragerais tous les pays de travailler avec les régulateurs, doivent travailler avec les opérateurs et les autres acteurs concernant. Déjà, les régulateurs doivent faire en sorte que les systèmes qu'ils utilisent pour les monitorer ou tout autre système utilisé pour conserver les données soient basés localement dans les périmètres, dans les territoires nationaux. Mais aussi, un autre effort qui peut être fait pour également amener progressivement les opérateurs à loger les données dans les pays. Parce que nous faisons un effort au niveau des régulateurs, mais les opérateurs logent toujours les données hors du pays où ils exercent. Peut-être un effort également doit être fait à ce niveau pour que progressivement les opérateurs logent les données d'un pays dans les territoires de ce pays.
Thank you, Amotile. It's been a very, very fruitful and engaging conversation. I think I'll add my course to where I think we should be in 5 years' time.
Today's discussion has highlighted the urgent need for harmonization, trust building, and responsible use of technology in Africa's gaming industry. From AI-driven oversight to balancing transparency with operator cooperation, it is clear that collaboration is the best way forward. This is